So there's been a debate roiling in Israel this past week about whether a sukkah, the temporary hut we live in during Sukkot, whether a sukkah qualifies as an indoor or an outdoor space. The answer to this is significant because coronavirus cases have been peaking again there, and they're currently holding another countrywide lockdown. So they've needed to declare regulations for how many people can safely congregate inside a sukkah. But those numbers depend entirely on whether public health officials consider Sukkot indoor or outdoor spaces. As of Thursday this past week, the health ministry in Israel issued a number of complex regulations and ruled that Sukkot that are 50% open are considered outdoor spaces, which means up to 20 people would be allowed to gather in one. Of course, this ruling is problematically vague and is being highly criticized by many other health officials. And the debate still rages among Israelis about what a safe sukkah gathering looks like. But the reason I bring this up today is because this particular issue of whether a sukkah is an indoor or outdoor space highlights so powerfully the meaning of the sukkah. We normally consider outdoor spaces like tents as temporary dwellings and indoor spaces as permanent dwellings. But when it comes to Jewish law and Sukkot, that's not the case at all. In the Shulhan Arukh, the authoritative code of Jewish law put together by Yosef Karo, Rav Karo explains how we're supposed to relate to the sukkah. He says, Ketzad mitzvat yeshiva basukkah, what is the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah? Sheyeh uchal v'shoteh v'yashen umtayel v'dar basukkah kol shivat hayamim bein bayom uvein balayla kederach shehudar b'veito bishar yamot hashana. That one should eat, drink, sleep, lounge, and reside in the sukkah all 7 days, both in the day and in the night, in the same manner in which they reside in their house the rest of the year. And there's more. He says, Uvchol sha'a yamim, v'kol shivat yamim oseh adam et beito arai ve'et sukkato keva. And all 7 days, a person makes their house temporary and their sukkah permanent. He goes on to say how so specifically. How so? The fine dishes and linens should be in the sukkah, and the drinking vessels such as glass cups and mugs should be in the sukkah. The lantern, the primary light source, should be in the sukkah. If Rav Karo had lived in our time, he would have said the modem should be in the sukkah. So according to our tradition, at least according to Jewish law, on Sukkot we're to treat our permanent dwellings as temporary, and our sukkah, our outdoor hut, as permanent. Another way of saying this is that during Sukkot, we're supposed to consider the sukkah our true home. 7 days, excuse me, because as it says in the Torah, you shall live in booths in Sukkot 7 days. All the people of Israel shall live in Sukkot in order that future generations may know that I, the Holy One, made the Israelite people live in Sukkot when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. In the same way we try to take on the experience of slaves during Pesach, we're meant to embody the fugitive experience of our ancestors after they had left Egypt and lived in Sukkot. Though I am not in any way recommending that Israeli medical authorities rely on halakha, on Jewish law, to make their decisions, I do find it fascinating that if they did in this case, they might have to rule that fewer people are allowed in a sukkah, because whether or not a sukkah is 50% open, it is still considered for all intents and purposes the primary dwelling space of Jews throughout the holiday of Sukkot. And I would like to hone in on this Torah of Sukkot, of the sukkah, because it offers us helpful wisdom every year, but especially this year. The fact that during Sukkot, we're meant to relate to our homes as temporary and to our Sukkot as true permanent home highlights the holiday's annual reminder to us that everything we see and touch is temporary and fleeting. Even the houses that we normally relate to as permanent will one day crumble and become something else. This is the holiday when we read the book of Kohelet, also known as Ecclesiastes, which is a long meditation on the meaning of impermanence and the ephemeral nature of life. And it makes sense that throughout much of the book, the author, the rabbis say it was King Shlomo, the author questioned the meaning of life. He observes how short life is and how he can't possibly understand with his limited perspective why some wicked people prosper and why some righteous people are forgotten and dishonored. While he knows that wisdom and not wealth is the truest measure of human success and satisfaction, there's still so much about the human condition he can't understand. And he recognizes with sorrow and dejection how people are treated unjustly by their governments, how those in power fail the people again and again, how the punishment of a person who has sinned over 100 times continues to be delayed. Apart from the occasional pearls of wisdom that he sprinkles throughout the book, the author, Kohelet, and the book itself, it's mostly just a book of questions that we all have been asking ourselves more and more in recent years. What's the purpose of life? Why is it so hard for justice to prevail? How can evil find its way to the highest offices in the land? If the wicked are prospering and the righteous and the innocent are suffering, what's the point of being good and decent? If everything is fleeting, does anything we do or say have a real impact? I appreciate Kohelet's raw honesty, and I love that despite all its questioning, the rabbis insisted that it be a part of our canon. While there are other parts of our textual tradition that prescribe absolute faith, this book, along with Job and others, pipes up earnestly and says, I'm just not so sure. However, I still believe that despite living in a temporary makeshift hut and reading a book all about impermanence, that the law for dwelling in a sukkah, whether or not we can actually put up a sukkah, that the law for dwelling in a sukkah still offers us a distinct piece of wisdom. We are to treat our sukkahs as our permanent homes, which is to say that we are to take them as seriously, to consider them as legitimate as our houses and apartments. What this teaches is that yes, though everything we see and touch won't last forever, we should still treat it as sacred and real. Although it is heartbreaking to acknowledge that our family members, our loved ones, all the things that we love, that we will not always exist in this form, we must still hold close and honor all that we hold dear. Yes, this day, this particular day will come and go, but that doesn't mean we should dismiss it or sleep through it or deny its place in the story of our life. And even Kohelet, with all its questioning, expresses this. In the 9th chapter, Shlomo says, whatever it is in your power to do it with all your might, with all your koach, with all your strength. For there is no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom in Sheol, where we will all go when we are no longer alive. What he's saying is that while life is short and while our power is limited, while our lives are truly as flimsy as a sukkah, we should take whatever time and resources we have and do what we're able to do with all our might. Even if you don't know if your efforts will bear immediate fruit, even if you're chipping away at a generations old systemic problem that is deep and wide and complicated, even if you only have time to make a short phone call, even if all you have is a few bucks, even if you're not sure they'll hear you, What this teaching says is all of that is still worthwhile. We treat the sukkah as legitimately as we take our homes. It teaches to keep going, keep trying, keep calling, keep showing up, keep giving, keep speaking up. Take what you've got, do what you can, and do it with all of your might. Because even if all of this will one day disappear, all of this still matters. So let's treat our days like we treat our Sukkot. They're temporary and fragile, but they are real and they are holy. Live inside them fully. Bring in your best china and linens and your lamps and your modem. And in doing so, let us learn to live our lives like each moment and each action is significant and sacred. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.